I'm Marty Cohn, and welcome to episode 14 of PR Benefits, a show that explores the role of public relations in the COVID-19 era. I've been a PR practitioner for over 45 years, helping a wide array of organizations successfully communicate their messages to targeted audiences. I mistakenly thought that 9/11 would be the watershed event in my lifetime. Communicating in the aftermath of that tragic event was challenging. Then came the global economic downturn in 2008 with more lessons in crisis communications. However, 12 years later, we have the coronavirus pandemic and new challenges in uncharted waters have emerged. My guest today is Brenda Thompson, president of Brenda Thompson Communications in Los Angeles, California. Brenda began her career in journalism as a newspaper reporter and magazine editor. She was vice president of marketing for United Way for Greater Austin and served as PR and publication director for St. Edward's University. Before founding her own boutique firm, she led account service teams at a top Texas PR company. An enthusiastic advocate for causes as well as clients, Brenda serves on the board of, now here's a list, the National LGBT Cancer Network, as a member of the HRC Federal Club Council Los Angeles and the Counselors Academy of PRSA, and as a volunteer for International Bird Rescue. She previously served on the boards of Ballet Austin, Zach Theater, Leadership Austin, Sustainable Food Center, and the Girl Scouts, and was a founding member of the Ann Richards School for Young Women's Leaders. After doing all of that, she was also appointed by the Austin City Council to serve on the Library Commission. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you.
Wow, that is what I love. You know, as I learn about different folks around the country, you know, the PR stuff, and we'll get to that, and you'll tell me all, you know, your highlights. But it's the other stuff, you know, the what I call the give back, and it's a great list, and it's wonderful to meet people who give back. It's so important. So I kind of glossed over this, you know, in terms of how you got started. You started in journalism, and so tell me, how did you get started in public relations?
Well, you know, in journalism, we called it going over to the dark side. And I think PR people have said that too, that, you know, there was a time in college when, you know, I expected to spend my life in a newsroom, not doing desk side meetings with reporters for clients I was pitching, but being a reporter myself. And I loved journalism. I loved everything about it. I really didn't discover it until I majored in college at University of Texas in Austin. And they had a fantastic program. They had the top college paper in the country. And I just threw myself into it. And it just seemed like a perfect fit for me. I loved to write. I'm very curious. It came very naturally to me. And so that was my college career. And then I felt very lucky that I got to both stay in Austin and be a newspaper reporter, which was not an easy thing to do back when I graduated from college. A lot of my friends had to get their start at much smaller cities and worked their way up to incredible jobs. I mean, I've had friends who were in the China Bureau of Time magazine, and lots of friends in Associated Press and Reuters and Bloomberg. But instead, I went to work at the Hill Country News because I was determined to stay in Austin for a lot of different reasons. And so it was a weekly paper where, you know, because I was the only woman reporter, I covered churches and weddings and food, as well as, you know, the school board and a billion other things. It was kind of a far cry from the Daily Texan, where we had like amazing equipment and, you know, top-notch resources of all kinds. But it was good. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And then I went to work at a local magazine in Austin. It was the Austin Monthly Magazine. And it was then that I became aware of a job in public relations that just sounded too good to be true. And at that point, still wanting to stay in Austin for mostly personal reasons at that point. You know, I kind of saw the writing on the wall that there wasn't really the next journalism job for me. The magazine I worked for was kind of starting to not do so well. So again, writing on the wall. So this job was at St. Edward's University, and it was director of public relations. And I'd never written a news release in my life. I mean, I'd written many, many newspaper and magazine articles, but somehow I talked them into hiring me for this job as director of PR and publications. And I stayed there for 10 years. So that's how I got into PR.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you did. So, so then you made you went over to the dark side.
Right.
All right, fine. So now thinking pre-COVID,
yeah,
so that's up till February. What would you consider to be some of the highlights of your pre-COVID-19 career?
Okay. I've been fortunate enough to get to do a lot of really, really cool things over the years. And I guess when I think of highlights, I think of things that were really important to me personally as well as professionally. So you mentioned the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders. So through a series of events, I became good friends with Ann Richards, the governor of Texas, and was able to have a once-in-a-lifetime trip with her and 7 of her other close friends to Africa. So we had a 3-week trip to Africa, and it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And she, being in her orbit for that amount of time was an incredible experience. And these other women who were incredible people from all over the country, most of whom I didn't know before the trip. But through that relationship and growing that relationship, she had asked me to get involved there was a movement to name a school in Austin for her. And so I had thrown myself into that and had gotten many, many people to jump on board in support of that idea. And because of all the press that it got, she was approached by a man who was starting with his own private wealth, public-private girls' schools in different cities that were really aimed at girls from economically disadvantaged areas. They were going to have this incredible private school experience, but with a public school partnership. It didn't cost them anything to go to these schools. So he approached Ann and said, I've seen all this coverage of your having a school named after you. What if it was a school that would be your school, that you would be involved in every aspect of it, from hiring the principal to selecting the board? So that happened, and then she asked me to be on the board, so I got to help put together, I was on the board, but I also became their kind of de facto PR person. So all of the messaging about the school, all of the kind of principles and how we talked about those, got to help pick the uniforms the girls would wear. It was an incredible experience. And the sad thing was that before the school opened, Ann actually died of cancer. She had been really ill and was getting experimental treatments at MD Anderson in Houston. But so then I ended up managing all of the press around her various memorial services and funerals with Bill Clinton and Lily Tomlin and this star-studded array of her friends and fans. And we got to raise a lot of money for the school, which was important because it's mostly privately funded. So
sure.
That was a really great
wow.
moment.
That's a definite highlight. That's a definite highlight.
Yeah, it really was.
That's
and
great.
Again, the personal as well as the professional. And I'm still, I'm a founding board member of the school. I still follow them with great joy. And going to their first graduation was just one of the most awesome things ever. So
great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. So now let's jump ahead.
Okay.
We're jumping ahead now.
Yep.
We're in terms of COVID-19. What are you doing for your clients during COVID-19?
Well, to be honest, one thing that I'm doing is doing a lot of work for a lot less money for a couple of my clients, because I'm really trying to help. And in this case, I'm thinking of two chains of local restaurants that are obviously very much struggling to figure out how to survive in this environment. So, you know, I didn't want to abandon anyone. So we've kind of worked out an arrangement where I could help them with all of the most important things to help them survive. And so it feels good to be able to have some leeway to do that. I mean, I've had really long-term relationships with most of my clients, like 5 years is probably the average. And
Right.
both of these I've been working with for almost 10 years. So, you know, I have all kinds of interest in keeping them afloat, not just for business reasons, but I'm, you know, personally want to see them succeed. And so that's one thing I've been doing with my two hospitality clients. But with my other clients, you know, there's been a lot of, I think like with most of my colleagues and with you probably too, you know, helping them communicate with their customers and to leverage the loyalty that they've built up over all of the years they've been in business, and also to, you know, continue to cultivate that and to be all of the things that make customers loyal, like to be transparent and to be, you know, authentic about what's happening, about what they're doing to keep people safe and to keep their employees safe. And so, you know, it's been some really long days and weeks and scrambling to do all of that. And,
Sure.
you know, never like anything else any of us have experienced before. So
I'm curious though, in terms of communicating to their target audiences,
yeah.
what channels are you using to communicate? Are there any different ones that that you're using during this time?
I mean, not really different. I mean, there's the same channels that we've used consistently. I think we've used them a little bit differently, and in some cases more so, but, you know, their social media platforms, their website, their emails. There's been, you know, an interesting facet of the, you know, internal communications with their employees, and also some more kind of, you know, smaller audiences of their most loyal customers, I think, than maybe in some other kinds of PR campaigns or initiatives, just because of the way this pandemic has affected communities of employees and neighborhoods and families.
Right.
So that's a little bit different.
Have you seen any difference in terms of your relationships with the traditional media?
That's a great question. So I think that one of the hardest things about PR right now is that, you know, traditional media was already really struggling. The news hole has gotten much smaller. There's much less attention for, you know, the small to medium business and nonprofits and for almost anyone. So that was already a huge issue in our profession. And the pandemic has made it very much worse. You know, newspapers and all the media that we work with have had furloughs, layoffs, cutbacks. And they're also, you know, understandably mostly covering pandemic related stuff. So, you know, these are mostly people I've worked with for a very long time. It's hard to see what's happening to the media and to, you know, people I've had relationships with for many years. You know, rooting for everybody to survive, you know, it's kind of emotionally draining and stressful. So there's that.
Well, I find that, you know, folks that I've had relationships for, you know, for a long time, I'm spending time, there's a certain counseling aspect to talking to them. I'm not just calling for business anymore. And I'm also looking to help them, you know, like I find that I'm keeping my ear to the ground outside of, you know, my clients, and I'm calling up, hey, here's a story, here's an angle, you know, just go for it. Just because I am concerned about the survival. I'm in such a small media market where I live in Vermont. The loss of a daily paper for us
Yeah.
will be significant.
Yeah.
You're in a bigger market, but I'm looking at folks who are, that you talk about being furloughed. They're not only being furloughed, but they're saying, hey, we may not make it until, we may not only make it till the end of the year. And
Yeah.
that's, I think that's really been, difficult in terms of watching that happen as
100%.
a PR person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You also sound like a former journalist, because the whole thing of, here's some other stories and here's some angles. I mean, I love doing that with the reporters I know really well. But, you're in Vermont and I'm in LA. Even the LA Times, which has some of the deepest pockets of any daily newspaper in the country, whenever I see their ads touting that you can also see everything they're doing online, I know it's a matter of time until I'm not getting the print edition every day, which I will always do as long as there are newspapers in print, because I still love to read the news that way as well as online. So,
Right.
I think in our lifetime, we're going to see just dramatic, much quicker than was even happening already, changes in the way the media works. And I think there's still a very open question about what are the replacements, because there are some things out there, but I don't think we yet have what's really going to be a replacement for the real, objective and investigative, skilled and unbiased media. So
right.
I think that's
right.
scary.
Yeah, no, I am concerned. All right, so let's jump to. There is going to be a time where COVID is going to be over. I'm convinced of that. So, what do you think is going to be the role of PR? You've been spending time talking to your clients. You've been counseling your clients, helping them with their internal communications, and developing a different kind of relationship, a very trusted relationship with your clients now. What do you think is going to be the role of PR as we begin? And I hate to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I'm going to use air quotes, the new normal.
Right.
I hate that term, but the new normal. What do you think is going to be the role of PR?
Yeah, some of these terms we're already sick of, like the new normal and pivoting. There just really aren't good replacements for those. But so you talked about counseling. I mean, I think one of the things that's been the most exciting for me to see, and these aren't necessarily all of my clients, but some of these examples are the people who have been so incredibly entrepreneurial and on top of coming up with ways to make their business successful or turn their business into something else entirely. And I think there's a big role for PR in that we have a place at the table. I mean, we're the trusted counselors to the leaders of these organizations, and we can help them, think through how they can make their business into something that will not only survive COVID. I mean, really, that's a lot of what this is about, is survival at this point, and what their business will look like going forward, and how not to, get completely invisible to their audiences during this time when everyone is struggling, and how to continue to talk to people about what matters about these businesses now and going forward. We're all looking to what is it going to look like after this, and we don't know completely, but
right.
It's a day-to-day thing. But as well as COVID, though, Marty, I just wanted to say that the other thing is the social upheaval in our country right now with Black Lives Matter and beyond. I think that's also the huge change that's going on right now. That's also something that with every single client, that's been an ongoing conversation. So in a good way.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic that we're having that conversation, and frankly, it's also been it has been a tremendous learning experience as well, in terms of what's coming out and making you rethink You know, my oldest daughter went to Virginia Commonwealth University, that's where she got her master's degree. And we used to go down to Richmond, Virginia. And, you know, I would go up, you know, we would go down Monument Boulevard, you know, and there were these giant, and, you know, there was an uncomfortableness. I couldn't quite, you know, I couldn't verbalize it. You know, I'm getting the words for it. But yeah, you're right. That is.
It's a huge change. I mean, you know, Austin, where I spent all of my PR career until 2 years ago, you know, there's conversation in Austin about the name of the city of Austin, which is named after Stephen F. Austin, who firmly believed that it was necessary to have slaves for the economy of Texas, and that if people weren't enslaved, they would be this, you know, force for evil in the world and the state. So, it's going deep this time. And these conversations, you know, UT Austin is having huge conversations that some have been touched on before, but it's going much further, and more changes are being made that are really significant changes. So I think this is almost like another, the importance of it to our work and to all organizations and businesses, and how it continues to evolve, I think is almost as big as COVID-19, to be honest.
I think you're absolutely correct. And that's, thank you for bringing that up. Well, Brenda, thank you for taking the time to come on PR Benefits. Brenda Thompson of Brenda Thompson Communications in Los Angeles, California. I also want to thank Richard Melanson at BCTV for helping to edit this show, and Rachel Cohn, my daughter, who's an art professor at Ball State, for her technical assistance, and also Twin Musicom for the music, Hat the Jazz, that I've been using on the intro and outro of the show. It's been great to have that music. I'm Marty Cohn in Vermont. Stay healthy.